On this week's episode of The Insider, Rob will give us an update on the community calendar. Then we'll hear from members of the Hanford Revenue Measure Committee. And I'll be back with a high school football recap. This is the Hanford Insider for Monday, September 2nd. Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Hanford Insider. I'm your host, Rob Bentley. Thanks for listening. In community news, how amazing was it to see the community coming together last Sunday afternoon to welcome home Vietnam Army combat veteran Gene Oliveira from a long stay at the Stanford Medical Center. He'll spend the remaining days at home in hospice care with his family. Hundreds of citizens lined the street at the corner of Zion and Cinnamon as Gene arrived via ambulance to spend the remainder of his days at home. Cancer may take the body, but it can't conquer the spirit. Gene was seen waving to the crowd as the EMTs escorted him into his home. He fought with courage and valor overseas and was given a warm welcome home by several veterans organizations, the 1776 Sons of Liberty, the Hanford Elks Flag, and of course, his loving family, friends, and neighbors. The city of Hanford was recently awarded a $1 million grant called Hanford Goes Green. Among many other benefits, the city will be able to plant over 600 trees within disadvantaged communities in Hanford. There'll be a kickoff event scheduled soon. The next regularly scheduled City Council meeting is on September 17th. Here's some things coming up on our community calendar. At this week's Thursday Night Marketplace, it's Food Truck Appreciation Night with music by the Classic All-Stars. The Kings Players are presenting Outward Bound. Evening performances are on Fridays and Saturdays beginning at 7 p.m. There are also select matinee performances on the weekends. For more information, visit kingsplayers.org. Part 2 of the Kings County's Asian Experiences opens this Friday, September 6th at the Carnegie Museum of Kings County. Part 2 showcases local Asian communities in the years following World War II. Specific displays focus on the histories, cultures, and traditions of the Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, and Hmong in the area. As part of the exhibition, they'll be holding a tribute to the China Alley Moon Festival on September 28th. For more information, visit carnegiemuseumofkingscounty.org. The Kings County Special Olympics Chili Cook-Off and Cornhole Tournament will be held this Saturday, September 7th in the Civic Auditorium Park. Women with Visions Unlimited will be presenting their all-white party on Saturday, September 7th at the Kings Art Center. Tickets are $50 in advance and $60 at the door. If you have an event coming up and you'd like some help getting the word out, let's work together. Send your information to hanfordinsider@gmail.com. Be sure to subscribe to my weekly newsletter to get a complete calendar of events. On today's episode, we'll take a long look at the Hanford Revenue Measure H. I'll give you a little background on the measure, and then some members of the Revenue Measure Committee will be joining me to share some of their thoughts. This program is not sponsored by the city or any affiliated company. It's just my way of communicating with my listeners about the needs of the city and how the revenue measure will help meet those needs. I'm in favor of Measure H, but you'll want to listen to the following information, then decide for yourself what you feel is the best direction for our city on November 5th. I appreciate you listening. Since becoming a city in 1891, Hanford has flourished into a community of over 59,000 people. While maintaining its small-town charm and rich history, Hanford has grown into a commercial and cultural center of Kings County. To maintain the city's standing as a great place to live and raise a family, we must continue investing in essential city services, the maintenance of streets and parks, and an investment in public safety. In 2023, the Hanford City Council agreed that a possible revenue measure should be explored, beginning with an advisory body comprised of 15 community members. Starting in February of 2024, the Revenue Measure Committee studied both the needs and the functions of departments and programs funded through the city's general fund. This includes police, fire, streets, parks and community services, and code enforcement. On April 17th, the RMC unanimously adopted a draft 10-year expenditure plan which outlines their recommendation for how the potential revenues should be spent. The plan shows more than 90% of the funding going to police, fire, and streets. On April 24th, the majority of the committee voted to recommend to the City Council that there's a need for a revenue measure in order to meet the community's growing needs. Some of the key considerations were, Hanford is only one of approximately 30 cities in California without a district sales tax out of 483 cities. Current general fund revenues do not meet budget demands. Hanford has approximately $60 million in deferred capital projects over the next 5 years. A general sales tax measure requires 2/3 approval by the City Council to place on the measure ballot. A general sales tax measure requires support by a majority of 50% plus one of the registered voters. A 1% sales tax that would generate $19.2 million in annual revenue for the City of Hanford. Revenue from a sales tax measure will stay local and funding cannot be taken by the state. If approved by the voters, revenue may only be spent on priorities outlined by the expenditure plan. It's commonly thought that Hanford in the Kings County area maintains the lowest sales tax rate in the state. However, many other cities and counties maintain the minimum rate of 7.25%. The sales tax rate within the city of Corcoran in Kings County is 8.25%, since Corcoran maintains a city sales tax of 1%. The city of Avenel also maintains a 1% sales tax rate above the mandated 7.25%, making sales tax in Avenel 8.25%. Cities receive 1% of the 7.25% sales tax collected by the state of California within a particular city. Actually, Hanford receives only 0.95%, with 0.05% shared by the County of Kings. Although those Amazon purchases are convenient, there's no sales tax applied, so Hanford receives no income from your purchases from Amazon. If a revenue measure is approved by voters, it will be overseen by a Citizens Oversight Committee, and a third-party auditor must review and audit all expenditures annually. This includes ensuring all expenditures are made in accordance with the plan. Projects completed with funding from an approved measure would be eligible for state or federal matching funds should they be available. The measure submitted to voters will read as follows on the November 5th ballot. To provide funding that would remain local and cannot be taken by the state to preserve and improve essential city services including police, fire, 911 emergency response, neighborhood police patrols, crime prevention, maintain city streets and parks, address homelessness, improve youth and senior programs, retain local jobs, and other general services, shall the City of Hanford enact a 1% transaction and use tax, providing approximately $19.2 million annually until ended by voters, requiring an annual independent audits and citizens oversight? To pass, the revenue measure, which is a general purpose measure, requires a majority 50% plus one of voters voting on the question at the election. The revenue measure that will appear on the November ballot, if approved by voters, will enable the city to invest in essential city services, improve maintenance of streets and parks, and would include a large investment in public safety. Funding priorities include more police patrol officers and vehicles, additional firefighters and a new fire engine, a new public safety building, a new fire station, road repairs, maintenance and improvements to existing parks, more parks employees, and additional code enforcement officers. Last week, I had the opportunity to sit down with some members of the Revenue Measure Committee, and here's what they had to say. Well, joining us now on the show, we have three members of the Revenue Measure Committee. We have Victor Chavrine Jr., Andrea Baroni, and Lois Bentley joining us. Welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello.
So, Andrea, as a member of the Revenue Measure Committee, you had some experiences coming into it, not being a born and raised resident of the Hanford area. What was your experience serving on the committee?
Well, first of all, let me thank you for the opportunity to be here and talk about my experience. I come from a country which is Italy, where all these opportunities are really not available to the citizens. And so having the chance to sit down with the city staff and go over any possible question I might have about how the city budget works It was a very good experience. I enjoyed it. Definitely had a lot of different opinions. We had a very broad crowd. I think we were roughly 20 people. So far, it's been a very pleasant experience.
And how about you, Victor? What was your experience like on the committee? And maybe give us a little bit of your background.
My experience with the committee was very formative. I had the opportunity to work with previous experiences with many city officials and with my current job. And then also as a coach in the community and as a nonprofit director, I've had many interactions with the city. And so getting that deep dive into the city finances and larger experience of what city departments do and how their funding is sourced gave that insight that a lot of people normally don't get the opportunity to see.
And Lois, tell us a little bit about your background and what you brought to the committee.
Okay, well, I've lived here 35 years and I'm an elementary school reading intervention teacher. I'd never served on a committee like this before. I'd served prior committees, district parent advisory, school site councils. And so this was my very first experience. I thought it was very positive. I thought that the city officers who did the presentations, their presentations were very well thought out, very informative. They were excellent at providing information, answering questions. If they didn't know answers to questions, they were willing to go above and beyond to get those answers to you. So I thought they did a great job with the disclosure and they made the process really pleasant.
So that process involved a lot of public meetings that you were held and that you were involved in. And the city had that big giant binder that they gave you that kind of outlined what they were going to be discussing. And I think it was, 6 meetings? Yeah, 6 to 8 meetings. And they put in a lot of time and had a lot of studying to do to be ready for each meeting, and ultimately had a proposal to give to the city council to consider for possible revenue measures. So, Victor, can you tell us a little bit about what you discovered at the meetings and maybe a few things that stood out to you in terms of the needs of the city of Hanford?
You know, one of the biggest things that I came into the Revenue Measure Committee was in a parks perspective and a youth perspective. And the biggest accomplishment that the Revenue Measure Committee fought for was the need for new money to fund our park repairs and upgrades. So if the measure passes, there will be a brand new pot of money that when an equipment breaks or when equipment needs to be upgraded at our current parks, that money is now available. We don't have to rely on grants or one-time funding to make that possible, but we'll already have money from the measure to be able to fund new park upgrades. And that's just so key. And then the biggest thing too is that there's going to be new recreation staff hired. There's going to be more park employees hired to be able to maintain those parks. And that's so necessary. If you don't like how our parks look right now, think about how many parks the city has. And I believe the city of Hanford has 11 park staff to be able to maintain all the parks.
So, Lois, one of the things that the committee got to do, I understand, is to take a field trip on a cart bus around to various facilities in the city of Hanford and see the condition of things. What stood out to you on that tour?
Yeah, I think that we got to see a lot of things. You know, they showed us roads. They talked about, we got to see the state of condition certain roads were in. And then they talked about what, if the measure were to pass, what the plan was or the hopes were to improve upon those things. But I think the thing that stood out to me the most was when we visited the city police facilities. And so located in downtown, the buildings are between 50, 60 years old. The main city building, I think, was built in the late 60s, early 70s. And they're honestly running out of room to be able to house the people and do the things that they need to do for a city our size. In that process, we went into the main building, detective offices, facilities to store evidence, which you have to catalog and store for several years, are actually located in buildings that they had to purchase adjacent to the property. So officers have to walk to and fro to get to certain things. One of the buildings happened to have, it was the evidence building, had some leakage problems that they were working on. You know, imagine you have to store all this stuff. They had, at the time we visited, they had one functional holding cell. The other holding cell in the building was filled with storage. It also had some non-operable things. I think the toilet and things weren't working, so they couldn't house people in there. as a holding cell. The officers share a common area where their computers and their telephones are. They're just basically lined up next to each other. I don't recall a partition or anything. So if they're sitting and doing a report, making phone calls, you're going to hear the officers around you. It kind of reminded me of like a call center when you see a call center on TV, and you can imagine you're here, they're talking to you and you're kind of hearing what's going on behind you. But I think the thing that really was the worst, that just really stood out to me, was the dispatch. And the dispatch officers, that particular portion is housed in the basement of the building, and it's dark. There are no windows. It's close quarters. So they're in this windowless, close-quartered area for their entire shift, which I believe is 12 hours. I think they have the same shift as the officers. There's not a break room nearby, so they can't pop over, grab their snack, their lunch, and be close to their desk to get back to their job. They're actually eating at their desk. There's no restroom nearby. They're walking down a very long corridor to just go use the restroom. And in looking at that, I'm thinking, this is where the first response to 911 calls is, right? You're calling 911, you're stressed, they're managing your stressful situation calmly, they're able to help you. It's critically important. And I think how depressing it was just to think of the crucial job they're doing in this dungeon. It just felt like a dungeon. And I thought, we've got to do better for these people. Their job is critically important. I mean, of course, our officers are important and, our firefighters, but these are the folks that are on the line with you before that help arrives. And we're not even giving them a place that's comfortable for them to be able to do their important work in. So that really stood out. It just seems so wrong.
One of the biggest things that stood out to me, and one of the biggest things I want to talk about, is our fire department. The population of our city, we should be at 6 fire stations right now. We currently have 3. And so that's kind of scary when you think of big picture of where we're at as a city. And there currently is plans for 5 fire stations, but where that goes right now is we have the land for Station 4. There's no money to be able to build the station, and then there's no money to staff those firefighters. But if Measure H passes, we're going to be able to build Station 4 and staff that station within the first 10 years of the funding being received from the measure. And that's huge. And so as time goes along, we're going to be able to establish more fire stations. Here's the big picture of what I constantly talk about. If there's 2 fires, if there's a fire at Walmart and 10 seconds later my house catches on fire, the fire department, because the requirements of how many firefighters need to respond to that big fire at Walmart are not gonna be able to save my house. My house will burn down. And that was a real life experience we experienced on 4th of July when there was a brush fire going on because of illegal fireworks and someone's garage caught on fire. Hanford Fire Department was unable to respond in a timely manner because they were focused on the brush fire from it expanding. And so someone had property damage because our fire department was so strained and there's not enough firefighters.
Mr. Barone, so what happens if this doesn't pass in November? What do you think is going to happen to the city of Hanford if we don't get that 1% sales tax passed?
Interesting. That was one of the first questions that I had to the city staff. When we dived into the budget, and now the budget is functioning at this point, they expressed to us that we're living off of some residual ARPA funding that came through the allotted money that were sent over to the cities during the 2022 high surplus that we had back in time in California. We had a $97.5 billion surplus. $97.5 billion. And now we're in $44.9 billion in deficit. So all those funds that were grants, they are going to be drying up. So my first question was, what is that we can do if there is no tax revenue passed, if it fails? The city managers and the city staff that were there, they were quick to answer that the plan B is to cut services to the citizens. and switch over to a style of reaction instead than the reactive style of approaching calls from 911 instead than a proactive. In simple terms, is they're going to wait for the trouble to happen before they show up. That's ultimately the only thing that they can do. They'll try to do their best, but we're already running. They're already running thin. The city is short several staff. I think the staff currently is 64, and we should be in the 90s. And so we're short in several key positions, particularly patrolling, and for the police officers, we miss squadrons.
As much as the city has grown, our services have not. And so that's why we hear about a reactive style of policing rather than a proactive. And Chief Huddleston has shared with us about that recently, about the city just cannot handle the calls. We're talking response times. We're talking effects on homeowners insurance. I asked this question at the panel that they had. They had a webinar about the revenue measure, and I asked the question, how does this affect our insurance rates? And Chief Perkins will address that at the next panel on October 7th. But it talks about insurance companies have certain rate levels based on your amount of public safety that you have in the community. And because we are so understaffed, we're paying for it already. So let's, be able to manage that. Mr. Brawley.
One of the other key aspects through our tour and our analysis of the fire department in particular brought up the point that we don't have a training facility, and because of that, we lost a point into our gradings for the insurance evaluations, and that's going to cause us to pay more for our fire insurance. Ultimately, this will impact the citizen well beyond the 1%. We're really talking about a possibility that this can be a life or death situation that will be handled with a different kind of priority compared to what we're used to.
So we've hit on 4 of the 5 topics, and Lois, I'd like to ask you about this next one, and it's about code enforcement officers. We've had discussions about some of the lots in town that are overgrown, or some of the things that aren't being taken care of and become a fire hazard because of that. How will the revenue measure address code enforcement, improved code enforcement?
Well, there's a plan for that as well. Again, when we talk about more funding for more employees, then those kinds of concerns can be dealt with in a timely manner. And I think about code enforcement. I think about, gosh, in my lifetime, really haven't called 911. If I think with our family, I can think of one incident we needed our officers for 911. However, animal control, calling about, a nearby property with lots of weeds, or it's looking unsafe. Those are the kinds of calls I feel like, we've made as a family. We know we have friends and others that have done in kind. And so it's an important thing. These are things that need to be addressed. And these are also the kinds of things I think that people get angry about. We hear about these in some of our council meetings where, animal control can't come, or there's graffiti and it's not being taken care of. And, those kinds of things are upsetting to people. And with this, the potential of the revenue passing and having those funds, we'll be able to address more of those things in a timely fashion. And in some ways, maybe prevent it. If it's you're continually wiping that graffiti away or covering it over, well, maybe they'll get discouraged and not do it in that part of town.
Victor, I'd like to address, as we begin to wrap things up here, I'd like to address the issue of education on the event. As part of the education process of the revenue measure, the city is going to be holding 2 more meetings. One is an in-person meeting on September 12th. You can read the press release about the time and location for that September 12th meeting. They're also going to have another one on Zoom on October 7th. And my understanding is Fire Chief Daniel Perkins is going to be a part of that one, as Chief Huddleston of the police department was a part of the first one back on August 21st. And if you haven't seen the first one. It's on YouTube. It's also linked on the city website, but you can actually go back and watch the format of the presentation by City Manager Mario Cifuentes, and then Brian Johnson, the Communications Director, and Chief Huddleston were answering questions as it went along. So we lean so much on social media for our information, and the Hanford Insider podcast is part of social media. I mean, podcasting is definitely a part of that. And one of the goals of this show is to provide as much information as we can to the public, because oftentimes on platforms such as Facebook or some of the other ones you hear about, people will just paste information that they think is correct, but they may not have the background information to back it up. So, Victor, how do you think we can combat that as citizens of Hanford? How can we ensure that the citizens are getting the most clear and concise information and accurate information?
I think the city is doing a wonderful job on their education campaign, but that's all it can be, is an education campaign by law. So what I've done, and I've partnered with a couple people, and we've formed the Yes on Measure H committee, because we want to spread why this measure is so necessary for the community, why this sales tax is so needed. And I get it. No one likes new taxes. No one likes paying more at the store. But at the end of the day, it's going to help Hanford. It's going to help the future. And it's not about today. It's not about yesterday. It's what we can do for our community forever.
So let's wrap this up with you, Victor. What would you like the community to know about Measure H?
I know that there's going to be the scary things coming out of, like, what happens if the measure doesn't passes, and a lot of those things are true. But the best message I can give is, what do you want Hanford to be? Do you want Hanford to be the home for you and your family and future generations? Then we need the resources to be able to make that happen. And this sales tax and this time is necessary to make it a reality.
I think it comes down to a couple things. And number one is pride of ownership, right? We take pride in our home. We take care of things. And this is part of taking care of our community. The responsibility for that falls on us. And I don't love more taxes. I don't love the idea of paying more. You know how much I love a bargain and how I love to save money wherever I can. But in this instance, we have to move forward. I think another thing I would really like people to consider is, before you make a decision, please research, look at everything. The committee worked hard to put this together and really make a thoughtful recommendation to the council on how to proceed with this. It was very thoughtfully put out, and it's important. So I think before you launch on social media, or you just automatically make a yes/no decision, look at everything. Really look at it and consider it, and really do that with, what kind of community do I want to live in mind.
How about you, Andrea? What would you like the community to know about Measure H?
Well, I want to share how I got in here and why I did this. I got tired of listening, people telling me how things are, and I just decided to see if I can go find it myself. And I was provided the answers that I was looking for. I don't like taxes. I don't enjoy asking for more money to the citizen. But I put myself in the shoes of the people that need to provide the service. If they cannot provide the service, the first people to feel the service are going to be the citizens. Ultimately, it is in their best interest to vote for this. I'm not a politician. I have zero political expectations. I work as an IT. I work in IT for the local county office of education. I'm in my mid-40s, and I'm doing fine. I have no interest whatsoever to support one candidate against another. My main interest is to provide the best I can, the best suggestion I can to the citizens of Hanford. And after more than 20 hours spent asking every single possible question to the city, to all the chiefs. We came to the conclusion unanimously, almost unanimously, that the best is to put this on the ballot and allow people to decide. We did not put any demand on this because we felt pretty good that the city was going to do the right thing. And I think they're going to. When I saw the final draft of the measure, it really reflects our suggestions. Ultimately, we didn't tell the city chief, the fire chief, what they should do, how many people they should hire. They came to us. They told us what they need. We didn't give them our opinion. You just shouldn't spend the money on this truck. You should buy that truck. They know what is best for them. Our role is to provide the fund, or at least help them providing that fund. And that's what we ended up doing. And most of people stepped in that room the first day with the mindset of saying no. And I can tell you we had a lot of changes, and one of those changes was me. I didn't want to vote for it. I didn't like the idea. But when I see what is coming if we don't pass this, this is going to be really the best option that we have for the citizens of Hanford.
Well, thank you, Andrea, and thank you, Victor and Lois, for joining us. It's been a very interesting and enlightening time together. And if you need any additional information regarding the tax revenue measure H, you can go to the City of Hanford website at cityofhanfordca.com, and they have an entire report of everything that was discussed at the meetings, all of the need. It's very comprehensive. So as Lois suggested, make sure you educate yourself and read the entire script, not just what you see on social media or what your friends, your group of friends are saying about things. Actually go in and research it. And we all agree on one thing, and that is that we want a better Hanford for us, for our children, and our families. So again, thank you all for coming on the show, and we wish you the best.
Thank you very much.
And now it's time for Hanford Insider Sports with Eric Bentley.
Hanford High took to the road again, this time to face Sanger, and the Bullpups continued to prove that they are a team to be reckoned with in the Central section. After trading touchdowns all of the first half with the Apaches, Hanford scored with less than a minute to go and elected to go for two to take a 29-28 lead into the half. That was a lead that would not be relinquished, thanks in large part to the Bullpups' defense and special teams, who tallied 2 interceptions, stopped a 2-point conversion, and blocked a kick in the second half. The offense tacked on a few more scores en route to the 50-34 victory. Quarterback Daniel Gomez accounted for all 7 Bullpups touchdowns, throwing for 5 and rushing for 2. The 2-0 Bullpups continued their 4-game road start to the season this week, traveling to Santa Maria on Friday to take on St. Joseph. Hanford West suited up on Friday looking for their first win of the season as they hosted Corcoran. Unfortunately, the Huskies weren't able to find enough offense, falling 35-13. The Huskies will hit the road for the first time this season as they travel to take on Woodlake. And coming off of a heartbreaking defeat to start the season, Sierra Pacific was unable to bounce back on the road last week as Bakersfield got the better of the Golden Bears 26-17. Sierra Pacific will look for their first win of the 2024 season this week when they host Corcoran on Friday. As always, we'd like to cover as many local sports as possible, so if you have a score report or a story idea, make sure to email hanfordinsider@gmail.com. I'm Eric Bentley, and this has been your Hanford Insider Sports Report.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week's show. Join me next week when I catch up with Brad Albert from the City of Hanford Parks and Community Services Department to talk about some of the upcoming events. If you enjoyed this podcast and you'd like to show your support, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/Hanford Insider to make a donation. I'd like to thank Mickey Stoddard for his recent donation. If you'd like to join the Hanford Insider email list, Stop by my website at hanfordinsider.com to sign up for updates. You'll also get an exclusive copy of my newsletter in your inbox each week. You can send me feedback by voicemail through the website by clicking on the microphone icon. I'd love to hear from you. Your comments may even be shared on the show. I also need your help getting the word out about the show by liking and sharing on social media or telling a friend. For more information about the show, you can find this podcast on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, and YouTube at Hanford Insider. If you have a show idea, be sure to email me at hanfordinsider@gmail.com and I'll look into it. Thanks for listening. Stay cool in this warm weather and have a great week.